Nanoparticles in our food. Is it safe? Is it poisonous? Does the lack of transparency of companies speak to a future issue that we might have concerning these? Will it be the same as genetically modified foods? Will it be touted as safe now, and then later we learn of the issues that we might have and the dangers involved in consuming foods containing nanoparticles, such as titanium dioxide that's already in many health products and food products? Is this something that will revolutionize the food industry, from packaging to preservation to nutritional enhanced foods? Or will it lead to the further degradation of our food supply? Slipping through the cracks, an issue brief on nanomaterials in food. Now, as I begin this first special report on nanoparticles and nanomaterials in our food, I will say that when I first found this issue brief, when it was first released, when I covered it the week that it came out, I thought, oh, well, this is something new, this is something that's just coming out. But as I delved into the material more and into nanoparticles in food particularly, I found out that it's been an issue on the forefront for quite some time. And since several years ago, many years ago, way before even I was awake to all of the things that are going on and with our food freedom and the concerns that I now have, back before I even had those concerns and was awake to all that. So I want to cover this issue brief first, and it being one of the newest ones, but I will go back in future reports and cover various aspects of nanomaterials, some studies that have been done in some foods and health and beauty products, etc., that already contain nanoparticles. But in this issue brief, I wanted to cover this. You can see here the cover of it. That picture there is actually a microscope image, electron microscope image of nanoparticles from the Society of Optics and Photonics. And this publication, this issue brief, you can actually download the PDF of it that you see here on the screen. It's about 19 pages, but I really wanted to just look at some things that I highlighted that I've read through. And like I said, there's many other publications that have come out and many other studies that have been, and reports that have been published. That there's one that I'm looking at right now that's close to 70 pages, and so I'm not very far through that one. But there's many things to point out, and obviously many concerns that I have and that I've spoken about way before I read those. They kind of go along with the same things that those authors of those are saying and the studies are showing so far. So I'm on the right page with my thoughts on it, and it really is just when I thought that GMOs were our main concern, I'm starting to believe that this issue with nanomaterials in our food could possibly be a potential issue. So just going through this article and this issue brief, it gives an executive summary. It really sums up the whole thing, but one thing I want to point out, it says, in fact, many companies that sell products containing nanomaterials commercially may not even know that nanomaterials are in their supply chain. This issue brief is intended to inform companies, investors, and consumers about the emerging use of engineered nanomaterials in food and food-related products, and to highlight the potential unknown risks of this technology. The state of knowledge about how nanomaterial food additives may react in the body and what their health impacts may be is in its infancy, and while there is currently an effort to understand these issues in greater depth, the authors believe much deeper scientific inquiry should occur before nanomaterials continue to be sold in food and food-related products. So this report echoes what many have said about the genetically modified foods, and that there should be a moratorium on their use until at least they're labeled, and even further until we've really have independent studies and research showing that it's safe, when in the contrary has been the case. Introduction. Nanomaterials are often heralded as having the potential to revolutionize the food industry. The majority of food companies have not been responsive in providing information about their specific uses, plans, and policies on this topic, and no U.S. laws require disclosure. In addition, there are few, if any, studies adequately demonstrating the safety of nanoparticles in food additives or packaging. There again, just as there are no laws requiring disclosure about GMOs, there are no laws requiring disclosure about nanomaterials, so you can see a correlation there. AsYouSow.org, by the way, is the author of this article and issue brief. They have many other great informative pieces on their website, AsYouSow.org, and I continue to watch their site regularly as I look for news and things going on each week to cover in my Food Offensive Weekly News. But in 2010, As You Sow sent out and contacted some of the largest and most iconic food companies in the world, asking about their use of nanomaterials. Most companies did not know, and others said they had to, quote, check with their suppliers. And As You Sow also published a paper titled Sourcing Framework for Food and Food Packaging Products Containing Nanomaterials in December 2011, and then it kind of talks about this lack of knowledge that these companies have. And As You Sow in 2012 sent out a survey to 2,500 of these companies asking about their nanomaterial use. The breakdown of these 2,500 companies included 100 of the largest food processing companies, the 50 largest food distributors, the 75 largest food retailers, the 25 top food packaging companies, the 50 top fast food companies, 187 nutritional supplement companies. And despite the outreach that As You Sow tried to make, 2,500 surveys sent out, they only had 26 companies responded. And they say the lack of disclosure by food companies about their use or potential use of nano-enhanced products is an indicator that consumers, workers, shareholders, and government agencies are currently unable to assess how companies are evaluating and managing the potential safety concerns around the use of nanomaterials in food and food packaging. Now, this issue brief asks the question, are nanomaterials in our foods? Well, a study by American, Swiss, and Norwegian researchers entitled Titanium Dioxide Nanoparticles in Food and Personal Care Products estimates and quantifies the human exposure resulting from nanoparticle-sized titanium dioxide found in processed foods. Some of those foods include M&M's, Betty Crocker whipped cream frosting, Jell-O banana cream pudding, Mentos, Trident, Pop-Tarts, coffee creamer, etc. And this article goes on also to say that in addition to the potential of nanoparticles being used in food-grade titanium dioxide, other planned uses of food-related nanomaterials exist. And some of those four main areas of concern regarding nanomaterials in food are such as nanofoods, nanofeed for chickens, nanoparticle pesticides, and nanoponds. Now, number one, the nanofoods, when you look at it, the last sentence talks about how companies want to what they would call a nanoceutical, meaning they would invent a nanocapsule that will smuggle nutrients and flavor into the body. Well, I would say that just like GMOs, it always starts out as something useful and helpful and for the betterment of humans and society in general, but as we know, it opens up the door for so many more issues and so many potential problems that later down the road is only when we find out about those things. And of course, when you're feeding chickens things that the nanoparticles could bind with bacteria in chickens as an alternative to chemical antibiotics, another good supposed potential good use for it. The nanopesticide issue there, number 3, that's what I'm looking at right now, and the other article put out talking about the potential for pesticides and revolutionary time-release type nano capsules and the good that could supposedly bring us. And also nanopons, of course, they are nanoparticle vaccines, using them for nanoparticle vaccines in trout ponds where the fish is ingested, and then of course this vaccine, how much is actually going into our body when we eat it. That's something we need to ask. And then if the issue of BPA and other plastics weren't enough concerning our food packaging and drink packaging, there is another subtitled section here, Nanomaterials in Food Packaging, that they are potentially looking at and possibly using already to promote nanomaterials. And it's saying that nanomaterials are also being explored for their promise to improve food packaging, including providing longer shelf life for foods, better barrier properties, improved heat resistance and temperature control, and antimicrobial and fungal protections, among others. And of course, then again, we do not know exactly what potentials that could cause, and usually it's not until later and it's already well into use and well established and, quote, hard to get rid of or hard to change the packaging and the way we transmit food. It's too late to change, supposedly, by then. Now, nanomaterials and their food safety. Consumer acceptance of nano-food products will ultimately hinge on the question of its safety. Yes, of course, that's what I look at regularly every time I do a video, every time I do the research that I do for my weekly updates, is the issue of safety, because for me that's the most important thing. Now, it says a small percentage of these particles can move on from the intestinal tract into the blood and reach other organs. Now, this obviously is a problem because of their small size. Nanomaterials, nanoparticles are able to go places in the body that larger particles cannot. And as a result, they can reach potentially sensitive target sites, such as bone marrow, lymph nodes, the spleen, the brain, the liver, and the heart. Nanomaterials or nanoparticles penetrating the skin can distribute through the body via lymphatic channels. And even inhaled nano titanium dioxide has been found to act like asbestos and silicone, in that it accumulates in the lung and causes inflammation and can impact DNA proteins and cell membranes. So here again, this is a product that can, as a result, dealing with DNA and could potentially alter DNA and potentially mess with the very building blocks of our bodies. And I would say that as these get into our body, what keeps someone from slipping a malicious type of nanoparticle into the food supply or into a certain food product, and how would they know that it's in there, and what keeps them from actually being tainted with that, and then we ingest it and it gets into our body in a way that normal food could not. So this has the potential to be extremely, extremely dangerous. This goes on talking about a Swedish study, influence of nanoparticles on blood-brain barrier permeability and brain edema formation in rats. And it basically shows that these particles can easily cross the blood-brain barrier and or produce damage to the barrier integrity by altering endothelial cell membrane permeability and induce brain edema formation. And again, the UCLA researchers report that in the mice studies that they've done, it says it directly interferes with the structure and function of genomic DNA. Additionally, after oral administration in mice, titanium dioxide particles were shown to translocate to systemic organs such as the liver and spleen, as well as lung and peritoneal tissues. Now, there's a lack of consensus also on the size that constitutes a nanomaterial. That's further clouding this whole issue. Back in June of 2011, the FDA draft guidance on nanotechnology classified particles as nanomaterials if they are smaller than 1,000 nanometers. Now, I will add that a nanometer is one billionth of a meter, just to kind of give you an idea of the size. On the other hand, the U.S. National Organic Standards Board has called for nanomaterials smaller than 300 nanometers to be excluded from organic foods. So there's some standards in place, but still, we're talking about very small, very tiny particles that could get in. And how do we know that these aren't introduced after any food testing is done? It's just so small and so could be an infinite amount in there that you would not even notice. It says nano-engineered materials need to be safely tested at the size that will be used in commercial products where people may be exposed or environmental releases may occur. Preparation and packaging materials, despite studies showing that it can cause lung toxicity and inflammation in mice. That's talking about nanosilver. It's already being used for food preparations. Now, the part that I really saw and was quite alarmed at is this next part, and that is, as you can see with the chart here, the comparison on the spending concerning nano products compared to the development costs and what they're spending on development versus the safety testing. This is a huge eye-opener, or it should be, at the potential issue we have here, and that's the fact that the great amount of money going into product testing and product developing to put it out on the market versus the amount of safety testing that's being done, and there's next to no safety testing being done compared to the money spent on the development of the product. And this brief says that the minimal amount of funds going into safety testing in comparison to that of new nano product development is this issue. It compares, in 2011 there was over $1.8 billion, $1.6 billion in 2012, and $1.76 billion in 2013 is proposed. And during those years, the funding for work in environmental health and safety as related to nanomaterials was $88 million, $102.7 million, and $105.4 million respectively. So you're talking about not even a tenth, if my math is correct, a tenth of the amount spent on safety versus the amount spent on product development. This is, as this article says, should be of utmost concern to the food industry where human exposure is virtually guaranteed. Yes. At some point we're going to be exposed to this if it's put out there. It says companies should be clear about whether they are sourcing products containing or manufactured using nanomaterials. Before using or allowing nanomaterials to be used in their food products, companies should ensure that any such nanomaterials have been proven safe in both the short and long term. Now, there is public concern about nanomaterials in food, and rightfully so, just as many people have woken up to the dangers of genetically modified foods and other goodies that are in our food supply. Nanomaterials are quite on the forefront of many people's minds and their concerns. Now, historically, genetically engineered foods and irradiated foods have faced challenges in gaining consumer acceptance. I mean, if you knew about that stuff, obviously if you weren't concerned and if those foods didn't face challenges in gaining consumer acceptance, then we have a problem. Now, this nanomaterial issue also is likely to result in roadblocks to consumer acceptance of nano-food products, and rightfully so. If it is all that we know it is right now, then yes, it should have some roadblocks along the way in getting approved or getting put in certain products, so on and so forth. Now, Tim Duncan is a research chemist from the FDA. He has recently similarly described potential roadblocks to the introduction of nanotech in foods, and he wrote in the journal Nature Nanotechnology. Duncan said, "What's holding back the introduction of nanofoods is the hesitation of the food industry, fearing a public backlash along the lines of what happened with genetically modified foods, and public fears in some countries about tampering with nature." Yes, because in a sense that's what we are doing, is tampering with nature. And this is the type of positive thing I want to point out here, and that's the fact that according to him, and I think he's correct in this, as we've seen recently with Prop 37 and other GMO labeling initiatives, is that the food industry fears a public backlash. Now, just as our government, to quote a famous quote, when the government fears the people, there's liberty. But when the people fear the government, there's tyranny. And that should be the same thing when it comes to our food. These food companies should be afraid that any little thing that they do that's questionable, if they know that there's going to be a backlash over it, then they're going to be a little bit more hesitant. They're going to be slower to put things out. They're going to allow us time to speak up. And I think that's important to point out, that if they know that we're not going to buy the stuff, if we know about it, then that's obviously going to slow them down, and that's a good thing for all of us. Now, concerning a 2012 Swiss-German study on the consumer perception of nanoparticles or nanomaterials, it says 67% of the respondents feared health risks from nanotechnology, up from 55% in 2008. So then again, and I look at that and I can see that people are, maybe that's from people becoming more informed. And then it also goes on to say, quote, "Consumers appear to be more informed about the details of the risk debates and are able to describe the risks better than in 2008. It says 6 nations in the European Union have restricted or prohibited GMO sale or use. 40 countries around the world now require labeling for GMOs. And a recent study in 2010 found that 93% of Americans think that GMOs should be labeled, and 63% were unsure if the GMOs were safe. In 2012, food companies spent more than $56 million in California alone to fend off a ballot initiative calling for labeling of GMO ingredients. And the initiative lost by only 2% of the vote. A recent report by the Science and Technology Committee of the UK House of Lords said consumers are particularly sensitive about new technologies involving the scientific manipulation of food and understandably cautious about their introduction. The public response to the development of genetically modified food illustrates how quickly the views of some sectors of the public can change if action is not taken to meet concerns they may have about new food technology. Yes, I would go back to what I said about the labeling initiative only losing by 2%, and the fact that there's a great awakening to the risks involved in some of the genetic manipulation and changes to our food supply, and that's a good thing for us, because the more people that are awake, the more we can hopefully make a change. And now there are emerging policies and regulations concerning nanomaterials in food. It says in July 2011, the European Union passed regulations on the labeling of nanomaterials in food. And then in contrast, the FDA has not issued regulations regarding nanomaterials in food. So does this sound familiar? Once again, many countries around the world have either all-out banned GMOs or required labeling, whereas the United States is the absolute opposite. So you can see an echo here, and it's the same thing. We're seeing history repeat itself with nanomaterials. But this time we have a better chance, and hopefully more people aware of it, to watch it, to keep an eye on it, make sure that hopefully it isn't what we think it's going to be. And if not, then we need to do the work to make sure it doesn't exist in our food supply. Now, the FDA recognized that ingredients that are GRAS, or generally recognized as safe, at the macro level may not be safe at the nanoscale, and that this technology may result in product attributes that differ from those of conventionally manufactured products. And so therefore, this would raise new safety issues that have not been seen in the traditionally manufactured counterparts. So it's basically saying that they can have a significantly altered bioavailability, and that we would have to say something is safe at a macro scale level. That doesn't mean it's safe at the nanoscale level. So those things need to be double checked and confirmed safe. In 2011, the FDA did issue a draft guidance for the industry, and it says this was a significant step because it prioritizes the properties and behavior of the materials over its size. But at present, no parameters, tests, or testing equipment or methodology have been established to identify or decide how to measure exposure, absorption levels, or behaviors of nanoparticles in the human body. And this is what they're saying could be a process that will take years. Well, let's make sure we don't serve people the stuff before we figure it out, like we've done with other technologies. There are some examples here of current public corporate positions on nanomaterials in foods, and a couple of the big ones, McDonald's and Kraft Foods. And McDonald's, this is one thing that maybe give them a little bit of credit here. They say that they do not currently support the use by suppliers of nano-engineered materials in the production of any of our food, packaging, and toys. So that's good news to hear from a company like McDonald's that has many issues in the food that they serve. Now, Kraft Foods says that we need to understand the potential this technology may hold for us in terms of food safety, product quality, nutrition, and sustainability, as well as consider potential applications where nanotechnology may be used in packaging materials. So they are currently not using nanotechnology as of now, but they want to understand it, and I would say, well, they probably want to understand it to know if they can make money off of it. Going back to the survey that As You Sow sent out to the 2,500 corporations, including the 100 largest food processing companies, they just asked 5 questions in this survey. One was whether the company is using nanomaterials. 2 is interested in or exploring the use of nanomaterials. 3, does this company have a policy on the use of nanomaterials? 4, does the company learn about and evaluate the use of nanoproducts? And lastly, whether anyone in the company is specifically responsible for product safety related to nanomaterials. So otherwise, do they have someone that's dedicated to that particular issue? And again, by companies not responding to this, only 26 companies responding, it highlights the general lack of transparency in the industry. And they have a chart here of the responses to the nanomaterials in food survey. And of course, this is, again, only 26 companies that respond to the survey. 10 said they do not know if they had nanomaterials in their products. That's scary. 14 companies stated that they were not using nanomaterials. That's good. And then 2 of them admitted that they were using the nanotechnologies. So you can see the other questions there. 2, they had formal policies. 3 had informal policies. 1 were developing policies, and 8 are not developing policies. So at least we can give them credit for responding to the survey. Now, the above responses highlight a significant challenge for consumers. Companies are divided on the safety of nanomaterials and make independent decisions based on their own interests, research, and interpretations of data without providing such information to the public. See, this is an issue, the same thing we have with GMOs, that any data that is released is usually released as a positive aspect of it and a reason why we should have it, but it's also the very same studies that are done by not independent researchers, but they're done by the company, employed by the very companies that are saying that it's safe and developing it and making money off of it, and millions and millions and millions of dollars of profit on the product. Now, As You Sow put out a list of recommendations concerning nanomaterials. And as some of these following recommendations are: develop, disclose, survey suppliers that communicate, disclose. Do you see a trend here? They suggest that they disclose what studies they've found, what products they're using it in, so on and so forth. Introduce questions about nanomaterials. Encourage companies to survey their suppliers. This is what investors should do. Ask questions. They should encourage. They should press companies to label their food products. And then consumers should question their companies that on their use of nanomaterials. They should learn about the benefits and risks. They should request that companies label the food products, so on and so forth. These are some suggestions that asyousow.org has made concerning this nanotech. In conclusion, U.S. consumers are following in the lead of their counterparts in many other countries by demanding more information about where and how their food is grown and whether it is safe. Californians, again, recent $56 million battle over a nearly victorious GMO labeling initiative demonstrates consumers' increasing emphasis on their right to know what is in their food. In contrast, most companies have not been forthcoming about their use of nanomaterials in foods and food packaging. And now this is especially true for a technology for which the FDA has acknowledged a lack of understanding regarding the safety of these materials in food products. And to avoid potential pitfalls, any movement towards use of nanomaterials in food should be undertaken with deliberation, knowledge, comprehensive safety testing, and full transparency to consumers and shareholders. It's really all about safety. The public's perception of safety will be paramount in determining consumer acceptance. This is especially true for a technology for which the FDA has acknowledged a lack of understanding regarding the safety of these materials when used in food products. Again. And then it goes down and they have an appendix on the laboratory results and how their method for testing these particular the donuts, the powdered donuts, and what they found. And then, of course, the article ends, the issue brief ends with the endnotes and all of the sources for their study. And it's quite lengthy, and this is just one of many that have come out concerning nanomaterials, and this one is just the most recent one, so that's why I came across it and really opened up my eyes and expanded my view of what we should be looking at going forward, and when we consider what is safe for us to eat ourselves, what's safe for us to feed our family, and what's safe for us as food service professionals to what we should be serving our customers, and the influence we have concerning these products. Again, like I've said many times, we can vote with our dollars on the things that are out, such as genetically modified foods and other things that are used in processed foods. We can speak out on those things. We can vote with our dollar and not buy them and force companies that are obviously just trying to make money. That's what a company is there to do is to make profit, to employ people, to make a product that is for people to purchase. And by not buying those products, it forces those companies to change the way they do things and change the method in which they're made and how they're served. And so by voting with our dollars, we can make a huge impact on these things. And with nanomaterials, we have an opportunity now before it becomes widespread and so deep within our food supply that it's nearly impossible to remove. We have an opportunity right now to make that change. And so going forward, I'm going to be covering regularly the nanomaterial news and research that has been done, and going over special reports concerning that. But until next time, read the labels, know what you're eating, know what you're feeding others, and stay tuned for more special reports on nanoparticles.